Hello BookTube, I'm Jonathan, and today we're going to be discussing 4 recent-ish sci-fi books, and I'm going to let you know which ones I enjoyed and what type of readers I think they might appeal to. So let's get into them, starting with The Mountain in the Sea by Ray Naylor. In this book, a marine biologist travels to a remote Vietnamese island because of rumors that a species of octopus has developed its own language and culture. And this is an interesting take on a first contact story because rather than taking place in space, it's set right here on Earth. And the date isn't specified, but I guess that it's supposed to be set maybe just a couple of decades into our future. This is a moderately hard sci-fi book and dives into the biology of the octopus as well as the challenges of communicating with a species that has a completely different biology, culture, and history from humans. The book also prominently features artificial intelligence, and I enjoyed the ways in which it compared and contrasted the nature of intelligence and consciousness between humans, octopuses, and AI. Now, each of the chapters in this book start with a quote from one of 2 books that exist in this future world. And normally epigraphs aren't always my favorite feature in a book, but I actually found these to be really insightful and tied in well to the themes of each chapter. I know they're fake books, but I'd actually be interested in reading them if Ray Naylor has the time to write them. I wouldn't say The Mountain in the Sea is a primarily character-driven book, but I did think the characters had distinct voices, and I cared about the decisions they made as well as what happened to them. In it, we follow 3 storylines, the main one which features the octopuses, then we have 2 others following a hacker as well as people on a fishing boat. I enjoyed all 3 of them individually, but a minor criticism that I had was that the connection between the storylines didn't land with a significant impact for me. Overall, this was an enjoyable read, and if you're interested in language, biology, and themes to do with intelligence and consciousness, I think you might enjoy it too. I gave this one an 8.5 out of 10. Next up, Titanium Noir by Nick Harkaway. Titanium Noir is a crime noir cyberpunk mystery where a detective shows up at what seems to be a routine crime scene, only to find out the victim is a genetically modified Titan. Now, before we get into this book, I'm going to give you a little backstory. I started this channel just over 4 years ago, and since then, I have not DNF'd a single book. Now, I think it makes total sense if you're not enjoying something to put it to the side, as there's only so much time in life for reading. But if possible, I like to consume an artwork in its entirety, and I think I'm able to provide better analysis to you, the viewers, if I complete the book. And while I would love to say this preamble was just a funny misdirect before giving it a 10 out of 10, unfortunately, I do have to say I DNF'd Titanium Noir, and here's why. Firstly, I didn't like the writing style. It riffs on Raymond Chandler-esque prose, which is something I quite like. Classic noir has a rhythm, a beat to it. Something like, I walked into the room, dark, smoky, reminded me of my mother's heart. Classic noir is sharp, it's fun, and while Titanium Noir does have that staccato rhythm to it, it felt like it was full of non-sequiturs, and sometimes I just found it downright confusing. To give you an example, we meet a character for the first time, and this is the exchange. Hi, Felton. Detective Felton raises his middle finger. It's like he's tomato, and I'm tomato. What does that mean exactly? I get that he's trying to say that these 2 characters are different and don't get along, but it seems like a kind of bizarre and nonsensical way of conveying that. It just felt like there was this constant disconnect where the book was going for some kind of parody and I just didn't quite get the joke. I also just never bought into the logic presented in the book. For example, in this world, there are genetic modifications to make someone much larger, to make them a Titan. And the victim that is a Titan in the book is 7'9". And the detective, the first person that they interview about the victim, they are surprised to learn that the victim was a Titan. He just assumed the guy was really tall. Now, this seemed absurd to me, but the narrator goes on to explain that this is actually a reasonable assumption, as there are only around 2,000 Titans in the world, and there are actually 8,000 people over 7 feet tall. But the problem with this is that 7'9" is significantly less common than just 7 foot. I actually looked this up, and there are less than 20 people in the world that are that tall. But who cares, right? Let's just move on. Well, the next 3 people the detective talks to are also surprised to learn the victim was a Titan. Again, the book explains this by saying the procedure is very expensive, and Titans tend to be rich and famous. So, while this victim was a professor and might have been moderately well off, it is surprising that he is a Titan. Well, you know what else is surprising? A 7'9" man! So anyway, while I wanted to finish this book on principle, I just couldn't get through it. I didn't like the writing style, and the story just didn't make sense to me. So after 51 pages, for the first time in over 10 years, I DNF'd a book. For reference, the last book I DNF'd was A Perfect Spy by John le Carré. I bought it at the airport, I read the first 100 pages on the plane, didn't really get into it and put it to the side. Well, here's the punchline to the story. I didn't know this when I picked up Titanium Noir, but Nick Harkaway is John le Carré's son. So while I'd like to say the book just wasn't for me and that's okay, it's nothing personal. Maybe it is personal. I need to call my parents and find out, do our families have some kind of ongoing blood feud? If so, my apologies to Nick Harkaway. I'm sure other people will enjoy this book, but maybe this is just a case of you being a Montague and me being a Capulet. Or perhaps I should say, you're tomato and I'm tomato. And just before we get to our next book, at the end of the video, I'll be spinning the quantum wheel in order to find out the patron pick of the month. So stick around for that to find out one of the sci-fi books I'll be reading in September. Moving on, The Gone World by Tom Swederlich. So I'm kind of stretching the limits of the word recent for this one, seeing as it came out in 2018, but The Gone World is another murder mystery combined with a sci-fi subgenre. For this one, it is time travel. The Gone World follows Detective Shannon Moss as she investigates the murder of a Navy SEAL's family, as well as locating their missing daughter. A case which is tied to the disappearance of a spaceship which was lost to the currents of deep time. I should let you know this is a rather grim book with some graphic violence, and while it might not be for everyone, I think the author does a good job of using this to create tension, as well as upping the stakes through his evocative prose. As a crime thriller, it hit some familiar beats, but it had me turning the pages and I was always keen to get to the next chapter. My only criticism is that sometimes it didn't really feel like we were solving the case, but rather we were just gradually being presented with the next thing that we needed to know. And I know that's probably how real detective work goes. You just keep looking for information and asking people more questions, but I would have preferred it if the case had some more interesting clues and puzzle pieces. In terms of the science fiction elements, things get pretty weird. The opening chapter is kind of out there, and it definitely hooked me in. The Gone World gets really timey-wimey, and I don't think there was necessarily anything wrong with the time travel elements, but I would say there were some conveniences. Also, the ending of this book felt a little anticlimactic to me in terms of the plot, but I think it served a thematic purpose. I thought some of the side characters were forgettable, but a lot of the story serves to develop the main character, and I think she was really well written. Overall, I wanted a bit more out of these science fiction concepts, but if you like a character-driven detective story, you might enjoy this one. I gave The Gone World a 7 out of 10. And finally, Upgrade by Blake Crouch. Logan Ramsey works for the Gene Protection Agency. After an investigation goes wrong, Logan comes to the horrifying realization that his genome has been hacked. This is the third book I've read from Blake Crouch, with the other two being Dark Matter and Recursion. I enjoyed both of those two, but my favorite was Dark Matter. And Upgrade is another fast-paced techno-thriller, but this time it's a little bit more grounded as the focus is on genetic engineering as opposed to something a bit more out there like multiple dimensions or time travel. As a result, there's a bit more science in this book, and it extrapolates on what we currently know about human gene editing. If anybody out there is an expert in this field, let me know how accurate you thought the science was in the comments. Now, the opening of this book hooked me in, and I think Crouch is a master of getting you to read the next chapter. There's some fun stuff for you to nerd out on, and some pretty cool action sequences in there as well. So I found this book just as readable as Dark Matter and Recursion. The central idea in this book revolves around a character having upgraded genes, which changes a number of biological characteristics, including his intelligence. And writing a super intelligent character can be a challenge. It's a similar test to writing from an alien perspective as a human author. The magic trick of this book is convincing us that this character is actually that smart. And for me, this was a mixed bag. I think some of the things he does is really clever, and the time in which he is able to process ideas and execute certain plans is really impressive. I also think that Crouch does a good job of creatively devising scenarios in which the character can utilize his talents. But there were other aspects that were less convincing. The character undergoes a cognitive test and is asked to complete a sequence. Now, I was listening to this chapter on audio and immediately thought to myself, I bet it's going to be the Fibonacci sequence. So the narrator continues, 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5. I'm like, okay, yep, I was right, Fibonacci. And the person administering the test is surprised that Logan completes the sequence, and Logan says he never would have been able to do it before his genes were hacked. And I was like, well, I figured it out before I even heard the numbers. I'm smart, but I'm not that smart. I feel like the cool name Fibonacci is doing a lot of heavy lifting when it comes to how impressive that sequence is. It's just adding two numbers together. But anyway, in defense of the book, that was just one of the questions that he was asked, but I didn't think it was the most convincing or best ways to demonstrate superintelligence. I think Upgrade has some similar strengths to Recursion and Dark Matter, but for me, there were a few more misses. I found some of the character decisions to be unbelievable, and while I did like the message in the book about compassion, I felt like it was rather heavy-handed. Overall, this was a quick, fun read, and I gave it a 7.5 out of 10. So there you go, those are my thoughts on 4 recent sci-fi books. Unfortunately, I didn't click with Titanium Noir, but luckily, The Mountain in the Sea was a pretty big hit for me. And before we wrap up, let's find out what I'll be reading next month with the Patron Pick of the Month for September. Welcome to the Quantum Wheel, where all of the Patron picks are both simultaneously picked and not picked until we observe a winner. Let's find out what I'll be reading in the month of September. Spin, Quantum Wheel, spin. What are you going to land on? Something I'm sure I'll finish. Looks like it might be Quarantine by Greg Egan. Okay, I am a massive fan of Permutation City, and I quite liked Diaspora as well. So yeah, if you like hard sci-fi, Greg Egan is the guy. It might be a hard sci-fi September if you want to join us. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, smash or just gently click the subscribe button. And if you really enjoyed it, consider checking out the perks of becoming a Patreon member, where you can become one of my robots, androids, or cyborgs like Nima and New Eden, Half-Ogre, Zakawe, Samil, and the upgraded Colin. And you can find more sci-fi content over here.